all in readiness for the final of heat of round 4 of the Australian Super Series, the Bob Jane T-Mart's Super Series for Group E touring cars, which means fairly standard cars, dominated mostly by turbocharged cars. The Mitsubishi Starions you see there, the GTV6 Alfa Romeo getting into it, and the four-cylinder BMW 323 as they go out now on their warm-up lap. 2 heats have been held so far, in which Colin Bond started from pole, followed by Peter Fitzgerald. Bond and the Alfa GTV6 now allowed to run a limited slip differential for the first time, and it aided him greatly to the extent of nearly a second a lap. Gary Walden, similarly advantaged at this meeting in the RX-7 Mazda, but also with slightly lower profile tyres than previously allowed, down to 60 profiles, took up 3rd grid position, but smashed his car yesterday and hurriedly rebuilt it overnight, and it's not too straight. Jerry Murphy took 4th grid position for the 2 heats in an Alfa GTV6, followed by Brian Sampson, Kevin Bartlett, Stephen Brook, and John Phillips debuting a new Cordia Turbo, another Mitsubishi, but this one a front-wheel drive one, not quite as powerful, but also lighter than the Mitsubishi Starions.
But despite the disadvantage of not having a limited slip differential, the Mitsubishi Starions have won both heats so far today. Peter Fitzgerald, in fact, the man who leads the title, won both heats today. The first heat he won from Brian Sampson with car 73, Brad Jones in 3rd position. The second heat was won again by Fitzgerald from Colin Bond, who had an accident in the first session when he spun out on the bowl and was clipped by a slower competitor, with Brian Sampson in 3rd position.
Another competitor, in fact, helped Bond to spin. And so now, as they form into grid positions, it will be Peter Fitzgerald in pole in car number 3 from 2 firsts. Colin Bond, 2nd grid position, car number 7 from a 23rd place and a 2nd. Brian Sampson will go to 3rd grid position in car number 78 from a 2nd place and a 3rd place. Kevin Bartlett will go into 4th place, 4th grid position from a 21st. Call to the pits, resumed in the first heat, took 4th in the 2nd. Gary Walden in the Mazda will take 5th grid position, car number 5. He had a 7th and a 5th. And in 6th place will be Bradley Jones. Bradley Jones's results in car 73 being a 3rd in the 1st and a 10th in the 2nd. Ready to go.
20 laps of Adelaide International Raceway, and they're racing. Colin Bond in the distinctive Alfa Romeo in the middle gets a good start for a change. Down the inside comes Peter Fitzgerald in the pale colour Mitsubishi, and he'll take the first corner. Brian Sampson on the outside in the blue car tucks in behind Bond. Kevin Bartlett coming down in the Starion, challenging Bond on the inside and takes him.
These cars racing for more prize money than those in the Australian Touring Car Championship. Outright, $2,000 compared to $1,250 for the Touring Car Championship, and $11,800 for the heat compared to $6,550 for the Touring Car Championship, a point which doesn't please Peter Brock. Fitzgerald from Bartlett.
Colin Bond in 3rd position.
A break to Sampson and Gary Walden, 4th and 5th.
Bartlett going for it down the inside onto the bowl for the first time. Fitzgerald clinging determinedly on the outside, but will be forced to tuck in behind Bartlett as they come down the straight, if he can find room, as Bond's already there.
And it's Jeff Phillips, John Phillips, in the Cordia Turbo, holding 6th place in its debut race meeting.
Anybody's corner now at the end of the long dragway straight at Adelaide International Raceway. Bond in the Alfa on the inside, well placed, but it's Fitzgerald who flicks across from the outside. Bartlett on the outside of that duo.
Bond had to win that one with another right-hander to follow, and he was still on the inside, and he knew it too, and was running well, using the track that he wanted, which meant that Fitzgerald ran wide, or Bartlett.
So it's Fitzgerald in the lead, Bond behind him. Then comes Kevin Bartlett, followed by Brian Sampson, with Gary Walden in the Mazda RX-7 in 5th position.
Bit of a break from them to Phillips, who heads John Giddings in the Datsun, with Jerry Murphy going down inside him. So quite a variety of cars.
The Mitsubishi Turbo and the Alfa Romeo GTV absolutely equal in weight to power ratio, both developing 1 kilowatt for every 10.1 kilograms of weight they carry. And look at the dice down the inside between Walden and Sampson. That's Sampson leading it as they dart all over the track. Sampson trying to prevent Walden from getting through, and achieves it in 4th position.
The latter of those cars, badly damaged yesterday, repaired overnight. Here's the Perrier BMW, which is well back in the field, down on par. No limited slip differential, so it doesn't get out of the corners quite as well as now the Alfa Romeos and soon to come the Starion Turbos. Fitzgerald, the dominant man in the Super Series. 6 rounds at each of 3 circuits, 2 rounds at each circuit as we look at 4th and 5th, Sampson and Walden, Adelaide Raceway, Amaru Park and Calder.
Amaru next weekend, of course, in Sydney, and then Calder in a month or so's time. And then some of these cars get broken down from their Group E specifications and become built up for Group A specifications to race at Bathurst in the James Hardy 1000 later this year. As Fitzgerald heads down the straight, Colin Bond clinging to him desperately, and a little way back is Kevin Bartlett in the Mitsubishi Starion. Fitzgerald leads the title on 58 points from Sampson on 44. Then Ross Burbridge and Phil Alexander in 2 under 2 litre cars on 43 and 41 points respectively, followed by Stephen Brook on 40, equal with Brad Jones.
That slow top corner relative to the corner that takes them off the straight, which is done with just a bit of a dab of the brakes and down a cog. And then now leading into the Bridgestone S's.
Bond lies equal 7th in the series on 39 points.
Bond's been a notoriously bad starter in this series, often missing second gear in the Alfa Romeo off the start line. It has a rear engine gearbox and a longer linkage than the Starions, and that's given Bond a little bit of trouble.
Walden tucks in underneath Sampson in 4th position and exits the bowl in front of him, then dives to the inside to try and keep him off his tail, but Sampson follows him across.
On the right-hand side, as we look at it, left-hand side of track, the leading trio doing their own slipstreaming duel, and then the latter trio doing the same, Walden and Sampson.
And Walden really loses out down the straight. Walden started at the beginning of the straight in front of those vehicles and drops back behind both of them.
The left front of the car still scarred from yesterday's damage, and the car not truly straight. Something like 3 centimetres shorter on one side from the wheelbase.
20 laps of Adelaide International Raceway is a long distance, and these drivers to a degree are undertaking long distance tactics, getting into the groove, feeling each other out, rather than going for a 5-lap bash and crash.
48 laps, 48 kilometres the race distance, 2.41 kilometres the individual lap, as exiting the bowl for the 5th time comes Fitzgerald, leading Bond right in behind him. Kevin Bartlett watching from about 7/10 of a second. Then it's Brian Sampson, Jerry Murphy, Gary Walden. Then it's John Phillips heading a bunch of 3 that is the tail end of which is Stephen Brook in the BMW.
And only 3.66 seconds separates Fitzgerald in the lead from Sampson in 4th position.
Fitzgerald, a sports sedan pilot, regularly drives a Porsche, and to a lot of people's surprise, he's been the dominant man in the series, a series that started, one has to say, with some illegal motor cars, and one driver has been put out and his points obliterated. He was a front-running Mitsubishi Starion driver early on, but Fitzgerald's car has several times been cleared completely for eligibility. And so we have to say that he's got the measure of most of the drivers in both preparation and driving. Colin Bondo here keeping a lot of pressure on him now, and really very content just to sit in there and pressure him. And you see the latter race further back there. 4th is Sampson, 5th Jerry Murphy, and 6th Gary Walden. as we watch the leading trio go through, Bartlett, and then we see that trio arrive.
Fitzgerald racing just off the lap record, a 69.17 second lap that time round. The record is 69 seconds dead, standing equally to Brian Sampson and to Colin Bond.
Jerry Murphy, a long-time Alpha peddler in fairly standard cars. Brian Sampson has tried most things. Formula 2, he in the blue car that we're looking at the front of this bunch, has won a long-distance race at Oran Park and Bathurst 9 years ago. Colin Bond, well, he's done more than most handfuls of racing drivers have done, having driven almost every type of racing car, hill climbs, gymkhanas, rallies, as they come up complete lap 7. And the frustrating thing about Colin Bond to everybody is that he's done every aspect of his racing absolutely at the front of the field. He really is a most marvellous whiz at driving, but also at car preparation. Could have been, was in world class in rallying and racing, single-seaters, sedans, almost anything.
Oh, and Bartlett working terribly hard in third position. The Mitsubishis arrived at the circuit on Thursday, some of them wearing limited slip differentials. They also carried a piece of paper, a photostated piece of paper, which proclaimed that the limited slip differential had been homologated by Mitsubishi. The stewards of the meeting said that they'd like to see something a little more substantial than something which wasn't even signed by anyone from Mitsubishi, and suggested that they take their limited slip diffs out for this weekend. But certainly the homologation race is on in Group E series production, and by Amaru Park next weekend we'll probably be seeing the Mitsubishis with limited slip differentials, and thereby maybe getting back the edge that they had on the Alphas before the Alpha got its limited slip diff for this meeting.
Just over 5 seconds back to 6th place from the race leader. Complete lap 10, they're at half race distance. And the race leader is Fitzgerald Bailey. On the other hand, he'd say, well, I've led it virtually all the way. From Bond, stalking, pressuring, watching, waiting, back there in second.
You can see the front end of Bond's, the right-hand front end of Bond's car damaged in the first heat collision this morning, and he spun out on the bowl, helped along by another competitor, then sat in fear as the field streamed through side by side, both sides of him. Thought he was about right when finally one of the tail-end competitors, all out by himself with all the vision in the world, came along and went boom, straight into the front of the Alfa Romeo.